The arrival. They say the stagecoach groaned like a dying bull when it rolled down the last hill into Dry Creek. Dust curled in the air, hot and stinging. The wheels rattled over stone, the mules foamed at the mouth, and the driver cursed them with a whip crack that cut through the silence like a gunshot. Folks on the boardwalk turned their heads as it stopped, the way men watch the desert sky when storm clouds brew. The door creaked open. A boot hesitated, then touched the dirt. She stepped down, Clara Whitfield, thin frame wrapped in a faded traveling dress, a trunk dragging behind her like an anchor. Her gloved hands trembled, though her chin held firm. The townsfolk whispered, another one, their eyes sharp, some pitying, some mocking. She looked up, blinking through the dust. He was waiting, a tall man, shoulders squared, hat pulled low, stood by the hitching post. His face carried the kind of weather lines the desert cuts into stone. Eyes gray as storm clouds fixed on her, not cold, not hungry, but steady. He stepped forward, boots heavy on the earth. "Mrs. Whitfield?" His voice was rough, quiet. She swallowed. "Yes." The silence stretched. He looked at the trunk, then back to her. The air between them seemed thick, the crowd leaning in. And then he said the words that silenced even the saloon piano drifting through the air. "I'm not here to own you." The whisper traveled like fire across dry brush. Men stopped spitting their tobacco. Women stilled their hands on their aprons. Clara's breath caught, confusion and disbelief flickering in her eyes. Mail-order wives were bargains struck in desperation. Everyone knew that. But this man had spoken as if he'd torn the contract clean in half. The driver slammed the coach door and rattled off with a curse, leaving Clara and her single trunk in the heat. The man, Thomas Hale, though his name was not yet spoken, picked up the trunk with one arm as if it weighed nothing. "This way," he said, and started walking. She followed, boots sinking in the dust, the sun hammering her shoulders. Every board on the saloon porch groaned under men leaning forward, watching. The piano started up again, a mocking tune. A voice jeered, "Won't last a week." But Thomas didn't look back. His silence was iron. The town bled into open land fast. Dry Creek was no more than one crooked street. A saloon, a store, a sheriff's office whose signs swung loose. Beyond it stretched the desert, mesquite scrub, red stone canyons, the horizon burning gold. His wagon waited at the edge, mule restless under the sun. He heaved the trunk in, offered no hand to help her climb. She pulled herself up, skirts catching, heart beating like a war drum. They rode. The creak of wheels, the mule's hooves in the dust, the silence of a man who carried something heavy no one could name. Clara dared a glance. His profile was sharp against the sky, jaw set, eyes narrowed, not at her, but at the land, as though it whispered things only he could hear. "Why?" she asked, the word breaking free before she could stop it. His head turned slow. "Why what? Why say that? I'm not here to own you." He let the question ride the wind for a long mile. Then, "Because I've buried enough to know a person don't belong to no one." His hands tightened on the reins. "Not anymore." The mule brayed, and the desert swallowed his words. By dusk the land had changed, sagebrush thick, the horizon cut by dark ridges. The wagon rattled into a valley where fence posts leaned tired but strong. Beyond them, cattle grazed, tails swishing. A ranch house stood, wood weathered silver, smoke rising from a chimney. A dog barked once, then quieted. Thomas pulled the mule to a halt. "Home." Clara climbed down, skirts heavy with dust. She smelled wood smoke, dry earth, the faint sweetness of hay. The house loomed larger than she expected, plain but solid. She touched the porch rail, worn smooth. A rocking chair sat empty, creaking in the evening wind. Thomas carried her trunk inside without asking. The door swung on its hinges, revealing a room lit by lamplight. Table scarred with knife marks, shelves lined with jars, a rifle propped against the wall. It felt lived in, not lonely, yet something in the air told her it had known silence for too long. He set the trunk by the stair. "You'll have your own room." She nodded, unsure what to say. The dog patted in, tail low, sniffing at her skirts. Thomas knelt, scratched behind its ears, then looked up at her with eyes softer than before. "You hungry?" She opened her mouth to answer, but the sound of hooves cut her short. Outside, beyond the fence line, riders moved across the ridge, black shapes against the fire-red sky, slow and watching. The dog growled. Thomas stood, hand brushing the rifle stock by the wall. His jaw locked tight. The riders didn't come closer. They lingered on the ridge, dark against the dying sun, then turned and vanished into the canyon. Dust trailed behind them like smoke. Clara's breath shook. "Ooh, Blackthorn riders," Thomas said flat. "Keep to their kind. For now." Her skin prickled. She saw it then, not fear in his eyes, but a weight. A warning. The lamp flickered as wind rattled the shutters. He shut the door slow, bolted it, and turned back to her. "Rest while you can." And in that silence, heavy and waiting, the old storyteller leans close to the fire, voice dropping low. "The desert don't let no soul rest easy. And every quiet man's got thunder hid deep inside." Shadows on the range. The rope burned her palms. Clara yanked it hard, the calf bawling as it tried to break free, dust kicking in her face. Sweat stung her eyes, and the sun beat her shoulders raw, but she didn't let go. The rope snapped taut. The animal buckled to its knees, then stilled, sides heaving. Her breath rattled, chest burning, but she held fast. On the fence line, the ranch hands leaned on rails, laughter sharp as spurs. "She'll give out afore sundown," one said. But she didn't. She tied off the rope, wiped her brow with a dirt-streaked sleeve, and straightened. Blisters throbbed on her hands, dress torn at the hem, but she met their stares without flinching. The men looked away first. Thomas watched from a shade of the barn. He said nothing, just tipped his hat and went back to his work. That small nod weighed more than the laughter. The days rolled that way. Chores hard as stone, nights silent, but for coyotes crying in the hills. And always, shadows moved where they shouldn't. It was Clara who spotted them first. She was hanging wash when she caught sight of 3 riders on the far ridge, black shapes cut against the sky. They didn't move closer, just sat their horses and stared. The wind snapped the sheets around her, white cloth whipping like flags of surrender. When she told Thomas, he only said, "Keep working." But that night, when she rose for water, she saw him through the window, alone in the yard, rifle across his knees, eyes on the dark canyons. The Blackthorn riders. The name whispered through town like poison. One evening, they rode bold. Clara was inside, setting bread by the fire when the dogs went mad, snarling at the door. She heard hooves outside, the laughter of men, cruel and careless. Thomas's voice barked sharp, "Stay inside," and she froze at the window. 5 riders sat beyond the fence, torches flickering in their hands. Their leader, Jedediah Blackthorn, tall in the saddle, his coat dark as tar, called out across the field. "You pay what's owed, hail, or we burn you out." The torchlight lit his grin, teeth white as bone. Thomas stepped forward, rifle cradled, but not raised. His voice carried low and steady. "Ain't nothing owed here." The men howled with laughter. One spat into the dirt. Another hurled his torch into the fence rail, fire licking up the post. The cattle bellowed. The dogs barked. The sky pulsed red. Clara's fists clenched on the windowsill, nails biting her skin. But Thomas didn't move. He just stood, calm as stone, watching until the riders wheeled their horses and vanished into the dark, leaving fire snapping in their wake. The ranch hands stomped it out, cursing, their faces pale. One muttered, "Man's gone mad. You don't stand down Blackthorn unless you got death in your pocket." Clara looked to Thomas. His face in the firelight was carved from shadow, unreadable, but she saw his hands. They trembled once before he shoved them deep into his coat. The next day, the whispers grew. In the saloon, Clara felt every eye on her when she stepped in for supplies. Cards slapped the tables. The piano faltered, the smell of whiskey heavy in the air. She heard their words through the smoke. Hale's courting death. Blackthorn sharpening his knives, she won't last a week. Then the door swung open, and the room stilled. Thomas walked in, hat low, eyes gray as the ash of old fires. He strode to the bar, poured a glass, and turned to face the room. The riders were there, 3 of them, grinning wide, spurs jangling. Jedediah leaned back in his chair, boot propped on the table. "Well, if it ain't the quiet rancher," he drawled. "Come to beg mercy?" Thomas didn't answer. He drank slow, set the glass down. His gaze cut across the table like a blade, settling on Jedediah. The silence grew thick, thick enough to choke. Even the piano man froze, hands hovering above keys. Jedediah grinned wider, but his boots slipped off the table with a thud. He spat, cursed, and pushed back his chair. "We'll see how long that stone face holds when fire comes for your land." He and his men shoved through the doors, spurs ringing in the stillness. The saloon exhaled all at once. Cards slapped again. The piano man struck up a tune too fast, too loud. But Clara, standing in the corner, couldn't take her eyes off Thomas. His hand rested on the bar, steady as a mountain. Yet in his eyes, storm clouds gathered. That night, she found a chest in the loft, hidden beneath a tarp. Dust coated its lid. Her hand shook as she pried it open. Inside lay a revolver, nickel gleaming even in the dark. A knife, its handle worn smooth by use. A folded coat, blue wool faded, brass buttons dulled. On top, metals tarnished with time, symbols of battles fought far from this desert. She touched the cloth. The smell of old smoke clung to it, the kind that never fades. Footsteps creaked on the stairs. She spun, heart slamming. Thomas stood in the doorway, face shadowed by lamplight. He didn't speak. His eyes flicked to the chest, then to her. For a long breath, nothing moved. Finally, he said low, "Something's best left buried." He shut the chest, lifted it like it weighed no more than a sack of grain, and carried it down into the dark. Clara lay awake long after. Coyotes howled on the ridge. The wind rattled the shutters, and she couldn't shake the sight of that coat. The next morning, word came. The Johnson Ranch, 2 valleys over, had burned in the night. Cattle slaughtered. The rancher's boy found hanging from the gate at dawn. A message carved into the wood: pay or perish. The storyteller's voice cracks like a whip at the fire. That was the night the desert went quiet, waiting for blood. Secrets in the dust. The chest thudded into the dirt. Thomas shoveled hard, the metal biting earth, sweat shining in the lamplight. Each strike landed like a verdict, silent but sure. Clara stood a few steps back, night wind tugging at her skirts, her breath tight in her chest. Coyotes howled across the canyon, their cries threading with the scrape of steel. When the hole was deep enough, he lowered the chest and slow. The revolver, the coat, the metals, they disappeared into the earth. He covered them fast, hands steady, eyes never lifting. "You shouldn't have seen it," he said finally, voice low, heavy as stone. Clara's fists clenched at her sides. "I had a right to." Thomas stopped, shovel blade pressed into the dirt. His shoulders rose, fell. Then he leaned on the handle and looked at her, face shadowed, eyes catching firelight. "I was Iron Hand Hale once, a name carried from Shiloh to Gettysburg. Men feared me more than bullets." He paused. "But war eats a man hollow. When it ended, I walked away. Thought I buried him for good." The silence between them stretched, broken only by the wind through mesquite. Clara's throat ached, words caught between fear and fire. Finally she whispered, "And now?" Thomas shoved the last of the dirt down, stamped it flat with his boot. "Now I'm a rancher." His gaze turned to the dark ridges. "But some ghosts don't care what a man wants." Underscore, 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 underscore. Days after, shadows lengthened. Clara felt them everywhere. The ridge lines, the empty barn doors, the faces in town turning quick when she passed. The rider's mark lingered like smoke. She was in the corral when hooves thundered. The dogs barked wild. Men shouted. Thomas burst from the barn, rifle in hand, as 6 riders came fast, dust pluming. They didn't stop at the fence. They rode hard to the yard, horses rearing, spittle flying. One grabbed Clara by the arm, yanked her toward the saddle. She fought, nails raking skin, a cry tearing from her throat. Thomas! He strode from the porch slow, rifle pointed skyward. Let her go. The man holding her laughed, dragging her close, knife gleaming at her side. Pay your due, Hale, or we carve our pound of flesh now. Clara gasped, struggling, but the knife pressed near. Thomas didn't flinch. He didn't raise the rifle. His eyes locked on Jedediah Blackthorne, who sat easy in the saddle, smirking. You want me to draw? Thomas said, calm as dusk. Jedediah grinned. I want the ghost they whisper about. Iron Hand Hale. The riders laughed, cruel and eager. But Thomas lowered the rifle, leaned it against the porch post, and stepped forward with empty hands. His voice carried, quiet but sharp. That man's dead. Jedediah spat into the dirt. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he signaled. The rider shoved Clara hard to the ground. She scrambled back, palms raw, heart slamming. The riders howled with laughter, circling her like vultures, then wheeled their horses and rode off in a storm of dust. Only Jedediah lingered. He leaned in the saddle, dark eyes gleaming. You got one more chance, Hale. When a fire comes, it'll take everything. Then he turned, spurs flashing, and was gone. The yard settled into silence, only the dogs barking at the fading trail. Clara pushed herself up, shaking, dust clinging to her face. She looked at Thomas, standing still as stone, fists clenched at his sides. Why didn't you fight? She whispered. His jaw worked. Because if I start, I don't stop. Her chest ached. She stepped closer, voice breaking. If you don't, more will die, including us. His eyes finally met hers, gray storm breaking open. Pain swam there, and something deeper, fear not of men, but of himself. Underscore, 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 underscore. That night, the air was heavy, wind restless, shutters rattling. Clara couldn't sleep. She rose, crept down, and found Thomas in the yard again. The ground where he'd buried the chest was bare no longer. The earth had been dug up. The chest sat open on the porch, revolvers gleaming, coat draped across the rail. Thomas sat in the rocking chair, head bowed, hands over his face. She stepped close, voice trembling but sure. You can't bury who you are. His hands fell. He looked up at her, the lamplight cutting deep shadows. A man who's taken more lives than he can count. What good's that to anyone? She knelt by the chair, set her hand over his. Maybe no one owns you, Thomas. But you don't own your ghosts either. You fight because you must. For a long while, only the chair creaked in the wind. Then he rose, slow but steady. He picked up the revolver, spun the cylinder with a sound sharp as bones clicking. Storm's coming, he said. The wind howled harder through the valley, like the land itself warning of blood. Underscore, 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 underscore. At dawn, smoke stained the horizon. Flames licked the edge of the Hale fields, cattle bawling, men shouting. Clara ran to the porch, choking on the acrid air. The riders had struck again, setting fire to the outer range. Thomas stood in the yard, coat across his shoulders, revolver at his hip. His silhouette cut sharp against the firelight. No longer just a rancher, but something older, something carved from war. The storyteller leans in close, voice dropping to a whisper at the fire. And when fire touched the Hale land, the iron hand they thought dead rose again. The showdown. The first shot split the night. Cattle bawled, fences cracked, firelight turned the yard into hell. Clara threw herself flat as bullets whined past, dirt stinging her face. The dogs barked mad, and from the ridge poured the riders, torches blazing, hooves drumming the earth like thunder. Thomas strode into the yard, coat billowing in the heat, revolver already in hand. His eyes were cold steel, his steps steady. The Iron Hand had returned. "Stay low," he barked. Clara scrambled behind the trough. Hands clutching the rifle Thomas had pressed on her. Her heart pounded, mouth dry, but her finger curled tight around the trigger. The riders came screaming, spitting fire and lead. Torches arced through the dark, landing on hay. On the porch rail, flames licking fast. Thomas fired once. One rider toppled from his saddle, crumpling into dust. Another shot, another man down. His movements were swift, unhurried, every bullet finding its mark. Clara steadied, breath ragged. A rider broke for the barn, pistol aimed at Thomas's back. Clara raised a rifle, sights swaying. She fired, kick slamming her shoulder. The rider jerked, tumbled from his horse, motionless in the dirt. Her breath caught. Her hands trembled, but she had done it. Thomas glanced back once, eyes sharp, a flicker of pride breaking through his storm. Then he turned back to the fight. The yard filled with smoke and screams. Horses screamed, men cursed, fire chewed the fence line. Bullets tore splinters from the porch rail, shattered glass from the windows. Clara ducked, reloaded with shaking hands, the acrid stench burning her throat. Then the riders fell silent, pulling back into the shadows. Smoke curled over the field. For a breath, the night was still, too still. And then Jedediah Blackthorn rode forward. His horse was black as pitch, eyes rolling white in the firelight. He sat tall, long coat flapping, pistol gleaming in one hand. His grin shone sharp through the smoke. "You should have stayed buried, Hale," he shouted. His voice carried like thunder rolling through the canyon. "Now the land takes you for good." Thomas stepped into the open, revolver at his side. His voice was calm, steady, carrying just as far. "You came to own this valley. But a man who can't own himself ain't fit to own anything." Jedediah sneered. "Then let's see who the land claims tonight." The men pulled back, forming a wide circle. Horses snorted, shifting, the fire painting their faces red. Clara's heart slammed as she crouched, rifle gripped tight. The night held its breath. Jedediah drew first, fast, brutal. But Thomas was faster. His revolver roared, bullets striking Jedediah's shoulder, spinning him half in the saddle. The outlaw cursed, steadied, fired back. Lead tore Thomas's arm, blood running quick down his sleeve, but he didn't falter. They circled, guns flashing, firelight throwing their shadows long across the yard. Jedediah lunged from the saddle, hitting the dirt hard, rolling, firing wild. Thomas moved like a storm, calm, every step measured. His next shot struck Jedediah's thigh, dropping him to one knee. But the outlaw was vicious. He snarled, eyes blazing, and dragged himself upright, pistol leveled. "Iron Hand," he spat. "They'll carve your name into a coffin lid." Thomas's chest rose slow. His revolver came up, steady, unwavering. "I'm no one's ghost," he said. "I'm just a man who won't be owned." The shot cracked like lightning. Jedediah jerked, staggered, and fell face first into the dirt, smoke curling from the hole in his chest. His pistol slipped from his grasp, vanishing into the dust. Silence fell. The riders froze, eyes wide, faces pale in the firelight. One by one, they spurred their horses and fled into the dark, curses trailing like shadows behind them. The yard was left to the dead and the flames. Clara ran to Thomas, dropping beside him as he staggered, blood dark on his sleeve. She pressed her hands to the wound, fierce and steady, her breath shaking. "Stay with me," she whispered. His eyes softened, storm breaking. He managed a weak grin. "Reckon I will." The flames hissed, the cattle cried, the night slowly quieted. Men from the town arrived with buckets, shovels, stamping out fire, staring in awe at the scene. None spoke, because they knew. They had seen Iron Hand Hale rise, and they had seen him fall back into the dust, not as legend, but as man. Clara held his hand, refusing to let go. The storyteller leans back from the fire, voice low, graveled by years. Some say the desert swallowed the Blackthorn name that night, never to be spoken again. Some say Clara Whitfield was never no man's property, but a woman who found her freedom in fire. And Thomas Hale, well, they say the iron hand rests easy now, his ghost laid quiet. But when the wind howls through Dry Creek, sharp and lonely, some swear they hear the crack of his gun still. The fire pops, sparks drifting into the night. The storyteller falls silent, and the legend lingers,